I know none of you have this problem, but from time to time I have a little situation when I start to be clear on what has to be done, and when it becomes uncomfortable to do, because compassion co-arising with wisdom, and the compassion can make you want to do something that either you're just not able to do, or something that wouldn't serve the greater purpose, that like reinforces inappropriate behavior, something like that. And so sometimes you have to do this harsh thing, and you really don't want to do it. So then you have to like kind of build yourself up so that you can carry it out, but that creates the opportunity for a training. It creates the opportunity for you to recognize that you don't have to puff yourself up or build yourself up to have the strength to do something that's uncomfortable. You just have to recognize that this is going to be uncomfortable. But in my heart of hearts, I know that this is the right action to be taken. And then just take that and just sit there and deal with your uncomfortableness. Don't try to push it off on somebody else. You just sit there and you deal with your uncomfortableness. And this is what makes our muscles, our spiritual muscles, grow strong, to be able to do the tough things, to go to the places that scare you, to be able to handle your business, and even when it's something uncomfortable, to be able to carry it out, and then sit and to when we talk about the suffering, and that suffering should be known, the cause of it known, and the way leading to its eradication known, and thereby attaining the eradication. That is the Four Noble Truths. It's not just that life is suffering. No, it's not that. It's that suffering should be known. So sometimes we don't recognize suffering. We don't recognize, we recognize that situation right there, but we don't recognize what constitutes the true suffering for us. And so we're looking in the wrong place and calling that suffering, when that's not really the suffering. That's just cause and condition. But suffering may be arising and occurring somewhere else, and we completely miss it because we're looking at that over there. So what causes suffering then can be like not the fixing the circumstances. That's not necessarily the suffering, although you think that that's the suffering. The true suffering is what you go through inside, how you feel about the decision that you had to make. That's where the uncomfortableness is, and so it's learning to look and know where to tap, look in the right places. And so I had to make a decision about something yesterday that I didn't want to make. I wanted the other person to make the decision so that I wouldn't have to be the one to make it, but the person has difficulty seeing that, first of all, there's a decision to be made, and that if it's not a decision in their favor, then it's the wrong decision. And then how to carry that out. But we every day until the day we die, we're going to be confronted with having to, approach life in this way and do the tough things that need to be done. The thing is that if we don't, things will not get better because we ignore them, or because we just want to have happy face. No, we have to actually take care of matters. And sometimes it's better to take care of them while they're small, then they just don't get so big that when they're taken care of, it's like the big blow up. And this is all a learning process for us, especially those of us who are really trying to cultivate and walk in kindness. It's very difficult in a world gone mad. It's very difficult in a time when people have lost their wits. And we can even get to the place that we think that, you just have to meet fire with fire, because there's no way, And actually, fire is a way of containing fire. That's why the firemen create a fire ring, to try to burn up and consume that which is burnable, so that when the fire's here, they just let it just go until it hits the ring, and then it goes out, because if taking away the fodder that would continue to allow the fire to spread. So sometimes it takes having to know which wisdoms to use. And we kind of only learn that by doing it. So the things that we go through and some of the feeling we have as we're growing and developing may not feel comfortable, but sometimes it's necessary. But the Buddha says we should, though, always reflect. Reflect, before we say or do or something. Reflect while we're saying it and while we're doing it. Reflect after we've said it and we've done it. This is the only way to get on the path leading upward, and it's the only way that we will ever come into our resolve from having this kind of mind to having this kind of mind. And so I had to take care of something in the best way that I knew how yesterday, or at least to address thoughts around something. It's not taken care of, but thoughts around something. And I got a little hard-nosed with it, like this is where, the buck stops right here, and this situation stops right here. And although it doesn't feel so kind right now, and it doesn't look so kind, it got here through being so kind that things just, got a little bit out of control. And so I said what had to be said, and, and put in a prescription for how we will go forward. And the person responded to me with a one-liner. And the person had not understood anything else that I said, or just in recounting the circumstance, just didn't, just can't see it, so there's no point in rehashing that, but we have to do something. And the person just said, I never meant, for things to go this way. And I know that that's true. I know the person never meant for things to go that way. Just people acting out of, their own unskillfulness, their own fears, their own anxieties, causes and conditions. These are situations that we all find ourselves in. But when the person said that line, I am one who practices the Dharma, that was the Dharma. It doesn't matter where it comes from, or who it comes through, or how it comes to you. But the key is being able to recognize it, so that when you look at yourself or examine yourself and see that you're missing your own mark, not somebody else's expectation for you, but what's the expectation you have for yourself. And when you see yourself vectoring or veering off of your own, expectation for yourself, for your own thoughts, your own speech, your own action, then you can just quickly accept and that you vectored off and get back on the path. That's it. That's all it takes. There's no point in me trying to justify to myself why I feel like this. It really doesn't matter. But when the Dharma convicts you and the truth convicts you, you just simply get back on the path. That's all. Whether anybody else knows that you got off or not, no need to know. No need to tell everything. But whether or not anybody knows you got back on or not, no need to tell everybody. But you should know for yourself, because it's your own inner integrity, and it's the only way of uprooting one's own suffering. And when you have uprooted your suffering in this way, or when you know the way towards uprooting suffering, even if you haven't perfected it, when you know the way towards uprooting suffering, then you can tell someone else there's no danger in that water. It may not feel so good, but that is the way to go, because ultimately your suffering will be uprooted and you will grow and you will develop and come into your own integrity. And it has its own kind of joy, and it has its own kind of peace. So today, remember, I would tell you sometimes that when I was with my Taoist master, well, not sometimes when I was with him. This time he looked at me and just said, because I would read the Taoist sayings and they were so lofty. And I was like, what kind of mind even thinks this way? I guess he just looked at me and said, she's just not going to get it. And then he looked at me one day and he said, Buddhism is for you. I was like, no. I looked at that. I'm not interested in that. And he turned to me again and he said, no, Buddhism is for you. And to make sure that I got the message, he took me over to a Buddhist temple and had those nuns ordain me quick. And then after I left him, that was the last time I saw that master. But I consider him one of my greatest teachers because he led me to the teacher I needed. And so that makes him the greatest teacher of all for me. But today I am going to give you a wisdom teaching from the Taoist tradition. This is by Lao Tzu. And he said, when the highest type of men hear the truth, they try hard to live in accordance with it. When the mediocre type of men hear the truth, they seem to be aware of what it means, but yet they are not aware. When the lowest type of men hear the truth, they break into loud laughter. If it were not laughed at, it would not be the truth. And so it was things like, I'm like, what is he talking about? And I couldn't get it was like, some things you really can't explain. They have to dawn on you. It takes the light of your own inner wisdom and conviction to shine on it for it to have any meaning for you whatsoever. And I didn't know the way of training to unpack the truth, to unpack these lofty sayings. And they're not just sayings, they are the truth. These truths that we don't easily see and that are hard to understand. So when we think we need to fight, in a certain way, these truths seem to say the opposite. Like whatever you think, Pannavati, just do the opposite and you'll be okay. Because, just not having developed the heart and mind to be able to see the big picture of things, or to give up my own personal craving or fear around something. To not be able to say, I don't know, so you just say something. And then that's my story. Now I'm sticking to it. All these things that we do, trying to protect, our ego, all these things that we do because we are not quite ready to put in the hard work of subduing oneself, one's own heart, one's own mind. But when we continue to listen to these things, and when we find a good teacher who can show us the path of learning, they can't make us know anything. We only know what we take within ourselves to know. So a teacher could teach until they're blue in the face. And, some people will never get anything because it's not really the teacher. It's whether I am willing to imbibe the teaching. Sometimes we choke on it. Sometimes it's too bitter. Sometimes it's too salty. Sometimes it just seems like too sweet. Like because reality has told me this, and this. Yeah. And so we shut ourselves off from the very thing that we desire. And so today, a lot has been going on around Korea, North and South, and the United States. And, I understand some people's view that maybe there's a madman in government over there who, has his finger on some nuclear button, but, you can find that in more than one place. And it can be a real scary thing when people are full of fear and neediness that and they sit in seats of power. So in every person's life, they have some seat of power. So in a certain way, we are all powerful. We all hold the keys, to destruction in the next moment. In some way, some fashion, some form, some aspect of our lives. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a big one, like say between Trump and Kim, or whether it's a smaller one between me and my spouse, or me and my subordinate, or me and my superior, or me and my child, or me and my neighbor, or sometimes just me and me, because we have this way of seeing, sometimes seeing both sides of a having of a story, having an understanding, awareness, having two perspectives. I see it this way and I see it this way is worse than just seeing it one way. At least you're not at war with yourself. But all of us possess a certain power and sit in that seat with our faultiness of mind. And so that's why the Buddha tells us to reflect all the time. And if you didn't catch something as it was arising and say, that's not the way to go, or look at, you have to do that, but check your attitude. The thing you're doing might be the right thing, but not the right attitude, not the right way, not, it's going to cause you to suffer inside because you know who you are and you know how you're trying to walk out your life. And if you do it in that way, you're going to suffer inside. And so here I was confronted with myself yesterday. They did little harm to me compared to how much harm I realized I was doing to myself, because I was getting a little hard around this issue. And I could feel the mounting up. You know how it is when you're just not gonna let anybody walk over you anymore, and you puff up, you mount up inside. You can still keep a smile on your face, but it's there, it's brewing, it's growing. You just try not to let anybody see it. But you know for yourself that it's there and it's growing. And so I found a teaching for me today that helped me to understand. I always said when I didn't fully understand how to walk in some of the teachings I embraced from Jesus, like when a man takes your coat, give him your cloak too, or when one strikes you on one cheek, turn the other. That sounds really good, but how do you get in there, and exactly what benefit is that? I was pondering these things, and I couldn't understand how to move with it, how to grok with it. And I remembered that when Jesus died, that if he died at that time, but when he left the scene from where he is by whatever means, his disciples went back to fishing. They said the master is gone. So that means that they didn't get it. So there's no point in me asking his disciples what he meant. I said, I think I need to go ask another master what that master meant. Give me another perspective. And so I do the same even when I find something in another spiritual tradition, like what the great Lao Tzu meant, what the great Sakyamuni Buddha meant, and I ask another master. And in that way, I get like it goes from being 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional for me. And as I start to work with it in 3 dimensions, it moves into the 4th dimension, where the real life of mere words resides. And so I needed something last night, and I found teaching number 30, warning against the use of force. Now, it's the exact opposite of what I have a mind to do at this moment. I'm thinking force is what's necessary. But I'm not just thinking force is necessary. I'm thinking force is necessary. And right there is where I'm wrong. Right there is where the ignorance is. It's the mounting up and the effort that's being put behind the force. When David was dispatched by King Saul to go out and slay the I think it was the Philistines that were warring against them. It might not have been them. They were always warring against somebody. Just pick any country, any tribe, any group. But when David came back victorious, all the city turned out for him. And they were in great celebration. And as he rode triumphant and victorious into the city. And they sang a song and they danced and they said, Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And when David heard the song, he fell off his horse, ripped off his clothes, and covered himself in sackcloth and ashes. And he grieved because as the general he had to do his job, but he found no glory in it. The humility of heart and the humility of mind. And that, and I tell you these things, I guess you say every Sunday, it's all about her, but it's not that way. It's to kind of show you, to be an example for you of how we walk this path, how we examine the things we say, the things we do, the things we think, and how we can apply the Dharma to counter those habitual tendencies or those actions that are made out of fear or out of delusion or out of self-centeredness or just, out of trying to do the right thing and just trying to figure out what is the best for everybody in a particular situation. How to protect those that you have sworn to protect from one who will not be tamed. How, these kinds of things. And so that's the only purpose. And so that I won't talk about anybody else, because, I got a whole lot I could just talk about myself, that I do. But I do it in the hopes that it'll give you the freedom, the incentive, the encouragement, the fearlessness to examine your own hearts and minds in these same ways. And when we do that, we become easier with ourselves, because we know, just like that person who said, it wasn't my intent to do all these things that I'm doing and continuing to do. It wasn't my intent. It's not my intent. It's like, person can't do any better at this time, So you have to do what you have to do. But not fine. No, there needs to be no grinding with it. There has to be no puffing up with it. Protect your own heart. Protect your own mind. Protect your practice. And so this is the warning against the use of force. It says, he who by Tao, or think truth, purposes to help the one who rules men, and in this sense, rules means who has taken on the responsibility for taking care of, for protecting, for seeing to the safety of. That one will oppose all conquest by force of arms. For such things are wont to rebound. That means that live by the sword, die by the sword. It's just the boomerang effect. It's just cause and condition. And we can see the result of our warring in the sickness of our soldiers when they come back, and how difficult it is for them to get the ugliness, the mayhem, the out of their hearts and minds. The things that they had to do, the things that maybe they didn't have to do, but they did. And how to put that aside once it's done. It's not just done, but it lives on in the hearts and minds of the doers. It said, where enemies are, thorns and brambles grow. The raising of a great host is followed by a year of dearth. So we have all of this pomp and circumstance, but in just a little while, you start to see the real repercussions. Therefore, a good general effects his purpose, and then he stops. He dares not rely upon the strength of arms. He effects his purpose, and he does not glory in it. He effects his purpose. He does what has to be done, and he does not boast of it. He effects his purpose. He does not take pride in it. He effects his purpose as a regrettable necessity. He effects his purpose and does not love violence. For things, here's the wisdom of the warning, for things age after reaching their prime, their zenith, their height. At the end of the victory, then, there comes the perishing. And he who is against this truth perishes young. Now, he may have been speaking in a certain context, but there's so many ways that we can take this wisdom if we know how to unpack it. And he talks against thinking that just because we win, we've won. And he reminds us of the importance of not winning and losing our heart. the importance of taking no pride, no glory in the conquest, because it feeds our ego and our ignorance in a certain way, that it will move us far from our course, far from our objective. And he's saying at every step of the way, look and see where there's a place to compromise. Understand what diplomacy is and cultivate diplomacy. You know, I was talking to someone this morning about another matter. It could have been the same because, the remedy, the antidote was the same. And I said, you can be right, but you cannot expect to win all the time. So sometimes we have to practice accepting defeat and giving the victory to others because we can't win. Sometimes we have to practice compromise or even giving up the victory entirely here to surmount and gain here. And we have to have the wisdom to know when it's time to hold them, when it's time to fold them. Some people can't do that. They only know one way. This is right, and I'm sticking with this until I prevail. But that's not the voice of wisdom. That's not the voice of truth. It is recognizing that everything in this life is understood and walked through in comparison to something else. So the Buddha says it like this: when this is, this is. When this isn't, this isn't. So no matter whether we say something is right and right is right, what is that? In comparison to something that we think is wrong. And on the opposing side, they feel the same way. They think they're absolutely right. So it's not really, when you get down to it, like always about right and wrong, because both sides think they're right. But the thing about clinging to and cleaving to tenaciously what I think is right can ultimately bring the opposite effect. It can bring total destruction, because right does not stand alone. It stands in comparison to something else. So as you go through this week, now Lao Tzu lived around the time of the Buddha, or maybe a little bit before, right? Yeah. And there's one teaching that I read, and he was talking about the religious man on the left and the group on the right. And I thought that was like a fairly new concept of left and right. But you just see how things are. They just keep going round and around and around and around in a circle. So here, 3,000 years ago or something like that, back then they were talking about the left and the right. So ain't no point in getting, our buns in a tizzy about that, because that's just stuff that goes around and around and around. But what we need to get in a tizzy about is what we will do moment to moment. How we will do moment to moment. How we will think moment to moment. And examining ourselves until we know absolutely that we are faultless. And then we can do without doing. And nothing will go undone. Whatever choice we make, we can make it with integrity. Even if nobody ever figures out, what the real deal was, you will know for yourself. That's the end of my talk for today. And I know it's a kind of sobering thought, but I hope it gives you a little bit of encouragement, because I look at the two Koreas coming together to me. Somebody say, oh, he's so naive, because we are so jaded, we're so tainted. We think things don't change. Things change all the time, including who's in power at any given time. If we get this notion that we're always going to be, that's a delusion. We have to know that. So we can't stick our heads in the sand. We should be very watchful. And we should be cultivating the things that will support us going forth in the future, instead of the notion that once a superpower, always a superpower. I'm sure Greece thought that, Rome thought that. You can just go down the whole tick list. But once the prime is reached, no higher to go. There is only one direction. And so, we're there at that zenith. We need to be thinking then how we shall carry ourselves so that the time after the zenith won't be too difficult for us. And if we've never had to have any diplomacy before, we might need to start cultivating the capacity now. And for those of us who think that things are never accomplished through diplomacy, I say we shouldn't be so jaded. For those of us who don't even believe war is the answer, but they think neither is diplomacy, where are you going to be? And I'm encouraged, nothing beats a failure like a try. So try it this week, where you were ready to just put your foot down. And you still might have to put your foot down. But make sure you don't put it down like this. Just put it down. And when it's down and you're standing in that position of authority or power, don't grind it in. But even as you're having to execute however you may need to, out of wisdom and compassion, stay soft with it, and you will not lose your heart. So if we could just close today thinking about someone that we know. And this is our meditation this morning. That every single one of us could use a little mercy now. And just starting, you included. We can give ourselves a little mercy. Most of us need to give ourselves more so we know what it is. Then we could give more to people. But because we're so hard on ourselves, we just shoot them in the foot. But as we start to become kinder and gentler with ourselves, we will know what this feels like. That feels pretty good. It is just the salve that I needed at this moment. And then after we give it to ourselves, we can take a little dollop of that and we can give it to someone else. And then that will become a way of life with us. Always looking first for the way of escape, not avoidance. Not doing what you have to do, but the way of escape is through executing with mercy.
My father could use a little mercy now. The fruits of his labor fall and rot slowly on the ground. Won't be long till he won't be around. I love my father, he could use some mercy now. My brother could use a little mercy now. He's a stranger to freedom. He's shackled to his fears and his doubts. The pain that he lives in is almost more than living will allow. I love my brother, and he could use some mercy now. My church and my country could use a little mercy now.
It's all right if you've forgotten the words. Just keep going. This is a cultivation of the heart. It doesn't need all the words, right? Could you substitute with Sangha?
I love my Sangha, and we could use some mercy now. Every living being could use a little mercy now. I know we don't deserve it, but we need it anyhow. We're tangled in that space right between heaven and hell. And every single one of us could use some mercy now.
Every single one of us.
Every single one of us could use some mercy now.
Every single one of us could use some mercy now. Thank you. May you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you and no danger. May you always be able to meet with the inevitable difficulties of life. Yeah.